welcome back to Pagan's Witchy Corner. My name is Pagan, and today I am joined by a new guest who I'm super excited to talk to and also talk about a whole topic I'd never heard of before, which is surprising. As many episodes I've done on this show and as many books as I've read, I've never heard of this topic, so I'm super excited to talk about it. But Blake Malliway, please, and thank you so much for being here. I'm so glad you're on the show. Welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on. I'm very excited to be here and talk to you on this really hot, almost 100-degree day.
Oh my gosh, yeah, we're all over here dying. That's why there's no video, because Blake and I are like, I can't. We just can't. I couldn't do it. I do it in cosplay, so I'm gonna die in cosplay. I can't. So we're not doing cosplay. We're not doing anything on camera. You guys just get the wonderful, audio stylings of our voices over here. So that's
My
a good
shrill
thing.
voice. It's been described as shrill. It's okay.
Oh no, that's not even remotely correct.
Good. I'll tell that to my brother.
Tell your brother I said so. And I've listened to a lot of voices. I've interviewed a lot of folks. So, so you have written a wonderful book that's called A Witch's Guide to Fetch Work. And surprisingly, out of all the times I have read so many books and so many different topics, I'm like, what the heck is a fetch?
Yeah.
I'd never heard of it before. And I was like, I don't know what that is. That's part of the reason why I even just requested a copy of your book, is I was like, I need to know what this is, because I don't. I've never heard of it, which is surprising, So I'm really, thankful that you wrote a book about it, because I'm sure there's other witches out there that are going, I don't know what that is. Can somebody explain it to me? And we're going to dive kind of into what it is. But first of all, where did the idea to write this book come from? And why did you decide to say, you know what, I'm going to be the leading voice and I'm going to write the book? Because honestly, I don't even know if there's any other books out there like this.
Well, and I should clarify, I don't think I'm leading, the leading voice in this, but the fetch is touched on in other books on witchcraft, but generally it's just kind of touched on, right? You get maybe a couple paragraphs, maybe a chapter or two if you're lucky. And then you're kind of left to your own devices to kind of figure out what to do and where to go from there with it. Um, but I kind of started with some of those, when I was putting together my own practice with the fetch. And then, kind of like I talk about in the book, I just kind of let my own experiences dictate what happens next with it. There's a lot of folklore about what the fetch isn't, but not a ton on what it is. And what I mean by that is, depending on where you're looking for information will tell you completely different things about what that actually is. So I don't know. It's just one of those topics that is just everything is true and nothing is true with it.
Yes. And that's kind of one of the big things that I was just like, okay, so what is a fetch? So kind of leading into that question, how would you explain to somebody straight out the gate who's like, I picked up your book, I have no idea what this is. Tell them kind of in a nutshell, what is a fetch?
Yeah. So I feel like okay, to answer that question, I'm gonna back up really quick.
Totally
In a
fine.
lot of yeah, in a lot of spiritual magical traditions, there are a lot of people usually view that there are multiple parts to one's soul, right? Um, and depending on, what your spiritual background is, will kind of dictate how many parts of the soul or self there are. Generally three. We have that higher self that, we attained, we aspire to be better than who we are, the cosmic spiritual self. We've got ourself here and now on earth, and then we've got that raw, primal, animistic part of ourselves. And that raw primal part, that's often what we associate as the witch's fetch. It's that part of the witch that just acts on pure instinct, you know?
Mhm.
So it's really, to summarize it, it's that part of the soul that's wild and animistic in nature.
I love that. And now, obviously, there's so many different roles of kind of what a fetch could be. It could be a guardian, as you said, kind of that primal being, a guide, even omen. Which,
Yeah.
that's something that we don't really, especially for new witches, they're like, what do you mean my fetch could be an omen? Like, don't
Yeah.
panic. Nobody panic, first of all. Um, and there's so many different outlooks to what it could be. And especially because the term fetch is pretty much, I want to say like Irish Celtic kind of in origin, but
Yeah.
there's different variants of it across all different cultures. So, what would you kind of say that, in your take, what would the fetch's role really be, and how do they kind of serve us? Do they serve us?
Yeah, I don't know. My relationship with spirits, I don't really believe in like they serve us kind of mentality with them. Like I really do view it as a give and take, you know?
Mhm.
Um I think I touch on it briefly with the idea of which is working with the spirit world, any spirits in the spirit world, whether it's our fetch, our higher self, spirits of the dead, the God, even, like what do they need from us? If they're all powerful, all knowing, like what could they possibly need out of us? And um, I think what they get from us, what our fetches get from us is like the pleasures of life. They get the wholeness and freshness of life. These are things that they can't experience without human involvement. And when we're working with our fetch, they can help us realize magical goals without human involvement. Like they can kind of bypass any obstacles that might stand in our way from realizing any magical goal we're working towards because they're able to work in that etheric spiritual plane. And that partnership with the fetch is really realized when um, we make the offerings for the things that they can't get on their own, and they
Mhm.
help us achieve the things that we can't get on our own. So, in that regard, you've got a beautiful give and take relationship with the spirit world that just is fulfilling for everybody.
I absolutely love that, and I think that it's such a great way, especially because, yes, when you were talking about how working with not just, your fetch, you also work with, spirits of the dead, or any other ethereal spirit that's out there, including the divine.
Yeah.
It's not just a, hey, I'm gonna show up, you do this thing for me. It's a big consensual relationship. It is a relationship where it is give and take, but it's not just you get to show up and take and ask and ask and ask. You also have to put in some effort with them and build that relationship. It's not just something that we can say, "Oh, hey, this is what we're gonna do, and you're gonna do this for me because you're supposed to." Tell that to a deity and see what
Yeah.
happens.
Yeah. Right. Exactly. I mean, you hit the nail on the head with it. The other thing that kind of just grinds my gears a little bit with spirit work is like the people who treat spirit work um like the fair weather friends, they only come around when they need something, right? And
Mhm.
then they don't do anything to kind of cultivate or maintain those relationships after the fact. I think that's one of the biggest challenges that I've heard people encounter when dealing with working with their fetches is um, just the consistency of the practice. And I even put in the book like daily simple practices that you can do just to keep that relationship going. And I think the comparison that I use is imagine if you have this friend that you don't talk to for 8 months, and then you call them up out of the blue and ask for $20. They're gonna be like, "What? Who the hell are you?" You know what I mean? Like, it's tacky. It's very tacky. So the whole point of it was not only to get to know your fetch, but to also make sure you're doing things that are helping you build a healthy, consistent relationship with it.
Yes, and I wanna kind of, continue that, consent and fetch relationship a little bit as well, because obviously we should talk a little bit about somebody who's we're gonna talk more about how to get into that in a moment, but, um, how do you feel that, somebody who's coming into this is like, "Hey, well, this is a part of me, so I should be able to command and control it, and, I should be able to possess it and tell it what to do." How do you, kinda give somebody that advice and be like, "Hey, no. We
Yeah,
we don't do that."
and I see where they're coming from. Like I really do. But here's the way I would relate that. Um, Have you ever had, and I'm sure you have, we've all
Mhm.
had these moments where we're just sitting down and we're just really beating ourselves up, like, God, darn it, I just sucked today. Like everything sucked. I failed. I'm a failure. We just kind of get in this habit of frankly being mean to ourselves,
Yes.
like everybody does it every now and then. And I kind of feel like that same when we encourage ourselves to be respectful with ourselves, that should also translate to being respectful to our catches, which are an extension of ourselves. You know what I mean? I
Yes.
hope I explained that correctly.
No, you did great. Like,
Okay, good.
absolutely.
Like just be nice to yourself, right? Like that's what it comes down to. I think there's a difference between um speaking in a clear, commanding, firm voice and just being an asshole. Are we allowed to swear?
Yes, you are. Yes, you are. Totally fine. Everybody asks. Honestly, I should probably put that in my ethics. Yes, you can swear just within reason.
Just within reason, right? between like speaking in a clear, commanding, firm voice to ensure that your intention is clearly communicated to your fetch, and just being an asshole to it. Um, but I guess, like if you get stuff done by being an ass to yourself, then who am I to stop you? But I still think that respect, kindness, goes a long way, even when we're working with parts of ourselves.
Yes, I agree with that. That's probably also why, like, most therapists would be like, don't yell at yourself. Like, don't call yourself dumb. You're not, you're learning. You're in the process
Yeah.
of doing this. Like, this is a learning experience. Life is a learning experience. We
Yes.
don't just wake up and not suddenly know how to do everything. And your ideas and everything are going to change throughout time. And you talk about that in the
Oh,
book as well, too, like how things are not set in stone and things will change. Heck, our whole
yeah.
ideal of fetches may change next year. We don't know.
Well,
Uh,
and I spend like the better part of like a year, year and a half ish writing, not just writing, but also doing the workings and the rituals. You know what I mean?
yes.
Um, and I think the last part of the book, I even say like, yo, my thoughts have changed since last year. Like,
Yes. Yes, they
I,
did.
I I feel like it's important for me to keep my original thoughts in there instead of going back and deleting them. But here's how they've evolved over the course of a year and a half of practice and study. And that's okay. Another author that did that really well is Raven Gramasi. And I'm always reminded, looking at him and his writings, I was always reminded that it's okay to do that. In one of his books, he's like, I know I said this in my last one, but my thoughts have changed. I've learned this, this, and this, and here's why it's different now. And I'm like, I just respect that so much from a writer.
That is definitely a wonderful thing to take, especially because, we when we start writing a book, and for those of you who are like, "Oh, hey, I can just go write a book in 3 months." Yes, you can. However, spiritual books take a lot longer to write. As somebody who's in the middle of writing one, I've been
Yeah.
doing it for several months, and I'm over here going, "This is gonna take a better part of a year. We're not even remotely close to done." I
Yeah.
totally thought I was like, "Yeah, I could totally turn this out in, like, 2 months." I lied to myself severely, severely lied.
Well,
So
and it's so funny. Like I need like strict pressure and deadlines to get stuff done. So like, I work for Cross for a book,
of
which is
course,
a
yeah.
publisher. So like I actually built like my next title, I built it into our catalog and I'm like, okay, I've already set the workflow for it. Like I have to have my manuscript done by this date. And now I have deadline and pressure for everybody else to make sure that I'm staying on top of it.
I love that. So, obviously, you're kind of talking a little bit about how your thoughts have changed. So let's talk a little bit about that since we're kind of on the topic. In the beginning of the book, excuse me, you had mentioned how faith is basically the witch's ultimate antagonist. And
Mhm.
then at the end of the book, you stated that that had changed, that faith is an integral part of your practice. So, kind of speak a little bit about how the evolution and how much faith actually plays into your practice now in comparison to when you actually wrote the original statement.
Yeah, I used to be really like very, I don't even know, like just crusty about the whole idea of faith. I feel like it's because we all have that religious background.
Of course.
Oh, yeah, something, pick a witch who doesn't have that. But I used to like shy away from the idea of faith because I would say, no, I am a witch. It is my job to get things done. If there's something I'm not happy with, I'm going to cast a spell and just kind of I'm gonna make the change.
Mhm.
And that's something that I embodied like a lot. Like, I mean, I would wear that on my sleeve like it was nobody's business. And then the more that you, and let me clarify, when you're working with your own personal power, you're casting spells on your own, like, yes, right? Like, I do believe that you need to create change and you can't just have faith that the universe is going to pay your, I don't believe the universe cares if you can pay your rent or not?
Right.
Um, so you kind of have to not have faith that somebody else or something else is going to take care of all of your problems, but you're empowered to take care of them. And like the way that that's kind of evolved is kind of twofold. If you're working with the spirit world and you give them a task, you kind of have to have faith that they're going to do that task. You know, um, yes, we can know that it's going to get done, but at the end of the day, until it actually happens, we just have to have faith that it will happen.
Yes.
So there's that part of it. The other part of it too is when we feel like we've done everything that we can and things still aren't turning out the way we want them to, we kind of just need to have faith that magic, the spirits, the gods are doing the best with what they have, you know?
Mhm.
And I'm not talking about the silly little things like making sure, your rent is paid. That's very important, obviously, but I'm talking about those more overarching things in our lives that really keep us going. So just kind of learning to let go a little bit, I think is huge when it comes to working with these types of powers. Um, I'm going to be super nerdy right now.
Please,
And
I love the
quote-
nerdiness. Go
Oh
for it.
my God. I'm a huge Star Trek fan. Like I love Star Trek.
I love that.
And like one of the quotes from like Captain Picard of the Next Generation, like I still think about all the time. He was like, sometimes you can do everything perfectly and still fail. And that's just life, you know?
Mhm.
And I'm like, yeah, that's true. Like I can try my best, do everything right, and sometimes I'm still not gonna win, and that is okay. So that's kind of how my thoughts on fate have evolved, since the beginning of the book. But yeah, that was a big one for me. I always used to shy away from it, but now I'm like, no, I have faith in my magic that things will get done.
I love that you had this beautiful evolving transformation with that, especially because that was probably really freeing, as somebody who also comes from that Christian background, I understand. Um having that kind of freedom to also break out of that construct of allowing yourself to say, yes, I grew up in this very oppressive state, but also at the same time, the terminology of that has evolved with me and applies to everything. It's not
Yeah,
just in that one space. They don't own the terms. They basically lease them from the universe like all the other religions
yeah,
do.
yeah, yeah,
So,
exactly.
yeah, it was probably really freeing for you.
It was. I mean, it was huge, and I think when we just kind of when we're not so rigid and like I'm reading back on this, I wasn't taking my advice in the beginning, I'm like,
Mhm.
oh no, faith, faith, faith. We don't need faith, we need results. And then like in chapter one, I'm like, you must allow yourself to be free of rigid thought. And I'm like, here I am saying like,
And
so I'm
that's such a beautiful thing though, because that allows you to see the humanity of it, And here's the thing, a lot of people who read witchcraft books or read books in general, like there is this kind of aspect to where it's almost celebrity status, but it's not. Like,
yeah,
we're all just normal, nerdy people out here writing books, doing podcasts, doing the things that we do. We just are sharing our thoughts with the world. That's basically all
yeah,
we're doing in written form. But we're
yeah,
all a bunch of nerds. And
yeah.
we are a bunch of people who are also learning alongside you. Our
Right.
thoughts do change, our practices change, they evolve, they grow. That's the whole point of witchcraft is that it's not a end goal. There's not any point where you're like, "Okay, I've reached the end of the path." No, the end of the path, honey, is death.
Yeah, and then even then, like that's the start of another
That's
journey,
the start of
like
another journey, right?
there's no ending to it. Um, and like I did this when I started writing this book, I remember like I would sit down, I had to get my ambiance going, right? Like
Of
I would sit
course.
down on my little writer's desk, I lit my candle, and then my mind would just fill with like, oh, you can't do this, you're so stupid, Blake. Why are you even trying? And then I would I would try to take control of the moment and just like turn those thoughts into demons. And I would actually just like start reciting like vanquishing spells from Charmed, like to those demons in my head, just to like symbolically get rid of them. And like when you do that, it opens you up to so much more. When you give an identity to those intrusive thoughts, those things that hold you back, those rigid ways of thinking that just keep you from it. It's so powerful. It really
It
is.
is so powerful, and it's definitely imposter syndrome is a real thing, and it sucks so much when that hits, and, as like I said, as somebody who is writing my own book in the process right now, like, it is definitely a challenging thing to go, "I don't know if I'm strong enough to do this," and my deities are like, "Yes, you
You
are.
got this.
You
Yeah.
got this. We did not give you this task because you were not smart enough. Now go forth." And then, of course,
Yeah.
like, I'll go and do the priestess job thing and be like, answer questions to some cute little baby witch who's like, "Hey, how do I do this?" And then I, info dump on them for 2 hours. And then I'm like, "Oh, well, apparently I do know my shit. Well,
Yeah.
okay, here we go."
Well, yeah, and I feel like too, writing I mean, I don't write for other people, I write for myself.
Yes.
Um, and I feel like when you're forced to, like, put your thoughts down on paper, it really well, I'm using air quotes for paper because I did not write this by hand, I promise, I used a computer. But when you are forced to put your thoughts into, like, Microsoft Word, you are forcing yourself to really digest and comprehend what you're studying and experiencing and learning, you know?
Mhm.
So I feel like, that was really my intention of like of writing this. And I remember thinking to myself in the beginning, well, maybe I can just, jot down my exercises or write my experiences and my personal, book of shadows or grimoire and just kind of have that. But I'm like, no, this seems like it could keep developing.
Mhm.
And if I intend to turn it into a book, then that's a good way that I can ensure like habitual practice.
Yes, I love that. So, speaking of working with your fetch, bringing it full circle back, now you have mentioned a lot of really great ways from spell work to divination to scrying to transjourneying. So, kind of what would like a day to day or a day in the life practice of working with your fetch look like?
Yeah, I think for me, like, the thing about witchcraft is that I do believe that it should fit beautifully into the structure of your lives, right?
Yes.
It shouldn't be something that we have to go out of our way to accommodate. It should be able to work beautifully with our lives. So a lot of my daily practices now with my fetch, they don't need all the fancy bells and whistles. Even if it's just a quiet moment of solitude in the morning when I start my day or before I go to bed, just to center myself really quick, maybe offer a little bit to my fetch, even if it's a simple visualization of like pushing my fetch out to like roam through my backyard or something like that. All of these are simple ways that you can acknowledge and cultivate that practice with your fetch. And the more that you do that, the easier it is to draw it up and call it out when you actually need to put it to magical use.
Mhm.
That's what my like daily practice with it looks like. And I say daily loosely, like there might be a day that I skip, right? Like if I'm sick, I promise you I'm just going to be laying in bed, not chanting invocations to my fetch.
Of course.
Um, but I would say that like 90% of the time, like some sort of daily acknowledgement or offering, or even just words of peace or something like that, um, come from me and our fed to my fetch.
I love that. And I love that it's simplistic. And, you know, I would say that that goes with any sort of spirit work of any kind of thing that any spirit that you would work with on a normal daily basis, like whether it be your deities, your spirit guides, your fetch, or whoever. Yeah, it doesn't have to be over the top. Like, I literally told my deities this week, I was like, y'all, I'm not lighting your candles this week. It's going to be like almost 120. We're not doing that. No, we're not doing that. I love you all. I will pray to you. I will bring you whatever you like, but I am not lighting your candles. I'm not adding to the literal fire of the
Yeah,
sun.
literally. Well, and it's the time of the year where it's like it's super cool in my basement now. So I'm like, oh, just work down here. Plus.
I wish I had a basement to do that, but I don't.
It's dark and spooky, just how I like
Exactly, exactly.
it.
So you obviously have pulled so many different forms of folklore into the book, from all the different cultural references and all the different ways that fetch and its other counterparts kind of touch all the different cultures. And you didn't even touch on all the different cultures. You touched on just a few, and there was still a lot of really great stuff in there. So
Yeah.
how was it your personal process of it basically saying, okay, I want to touch on these ones? Obviously, some have closed practice, so you couldn't touch on those. So that's understandable. But
Yep.
like, which ones, what made you go, okay, I'm going to touch a little bit on the Egyptian, I'm going to touch a little bit on the Norse, I'm going to touch a little bit on the Germanic, and, obviously the Celtic. So why those ones? And what made you go, okay, I'm not just going to pick one thing? And obviously, for everyone who's listening, this is not me saying, "Oh, you should just pick one." No, this is me just getting into the thought process of understanding why it is a good idea to bring a range of cultures into what we look at and why we should do that. That's my whole question
Yeah.
behind that.
Yeah. No, it's a great question. It's so challenging. So a lot of this folklore here, they tend to be the traditions that we draw most of the magical symbolism from, right?
Yes.
Like there's a lot of Norse paganism, there's a lot of, Celtic influences, there's a lot of Egyptian magic is still like alive and well and being practiced in some circles. And I think what I was trying to illustrate with this is, you know, the different, I don't mainstream is not the right word, but probably the more well-known sources
Mhm.
of folklore as it pertains to the fetch.
Yeah.
Um, and what I'm still kind of stumped with all of this is really figuring out where the fetch went from, um, actual folklore that everybody can tap into,
Mhm.
to being associated with the witch. Like that is like a piece that I think is very muddy. Like I don't think there's a definite answer on that at all. And the folklore from one part of the world regarding the fetch looks completely different from the folklore regarding the other part of the world. Even in the States, we had, I think it was Abraham Lincoln who saw his doppelganger,
Mhm.
his fetch, like and then we all know how that ended for us. Um, so there's all these different sources of folklore that try to illustrate what the fetch is, but they do it and then they also don't because where did the witch adopt it? You
Right.
know? So I don't know. Like those were just the ones that kind of spoke to me the most. And some of the practices are like traditions that I tend to draw some of my practice from. So
Mhm.
it just seemed right to kind of use those as my starting point. Who knows? For the next edition of this book, I might find other sources that make sense to include.
That would be really cool. Now, obviously, for we're gonna jump a little bit into the beginner stuff right about now, but for everybody who's listening, everyone's like, "Oh, wait, doppelgangers? Those are part of fetch?" Yes, they are. There's a lot of terminology for fetch. There's a lot of different like hats that the fetch can wear in its
Yeah.
different things. So, how do you think that we should separate from, especially for those who would be new and be like, "Oh my gosh, like if I see this, I'm gonna freak out. Like I'm gonna die." Like because yes, that has happened in some of the folklore, but also how do we kind of go from making it a negative entity, like, you obviously talk about some of the things like banshees and all of that, to more of it, this is a spiritual helper. How do we take it from the negative to a positive? And can we take it from a negative to a positive?
Yeah, I think we can. I think the witch has always found power in going against the mainstream, right?
Yes.
I mean, you wouldn't find the quote unquote normal person strolling through a cemetery at midnight, but you might, but
I
you'll
mean,
find me
maybe
strolling
you
through
would. Maybe they're just, weirdos. They just haven't discovered witchcraft yet. That's fair
Maybe
too.
right. You're right. Yeah. So I feel like that's a difficult one to reconcile. For sure. But like I say, I feel like experience does create that reality.
Yeah.
And I tend to view like I wrote about like the holy daemon. And I
Yes.
think the second or third chapter too. Where
What
like
was
that
I
is that
chapter 2?
chapter two.
I think it was
Yeah, I
chapter
think
2.
you're right. Yes, you're right. Daemon, yes. Where it's that part of the soul that, acts as the messenger the to the higher God, to the
Yeah.
gods, right?
Mhm.
Um, and then if we view like the fetch as like that part of that lower part of ourselves that's responsible for the earthly, mundane stuff, like that's how we can kind of reconcile that for ourselves. And I think personally that a name is just a name is just a name, right? If you
Yes.
don't feel comfortable calling it a fetch, you can feel just as comfortable calling it a, I don't know, a Honda Civic. A Honda Civic just drove by the window, so that's why I said it. But you know what I mean? Like,
If you would like to call your fetch George, go for it. Like,
feel
you
free, right?
know, I think that
Yeah.
kinda goes with most spiritual guardians too, that, we don't have proper terminology of names with. It's what name does this associate with your brain to make it to where it's easiest for you to work with.
Right.
So, obviously there's so many different avenues of the term fetch and its different, again, hats that it wears and the things that it could be. And to try to just put that all in like, well, it could be this, or it could be that, or it could be that, or it could be this. And it's like all of the above.
Yeah,
Yes.
exactly. And I firmly believe that the minute that you put, people ask me all the time, well, what kind of witch are you? Are you this? Are you that? Do you do that? And I'm like, I am just a witch. Because the minute that you try to put a label on it is the minute that you limit yourself.
Mhm.
And I feel it's the same with the spirits that we work with, right? Like if you try to get this image in your head of the fetch always being a harbinger of death, then okay, fine. That's what you might conjure out of it. It's only going to come out when you know what I mean. So the idea is to just kind of strip yourself of all preconceived ideas on what you think it could be and just let the experience of your working relationship with your fetch create what its meaning is for you.
Yes. So obviously, your book also kind of bringing it back to again that whole beginner state is kind of what would you bring your book to? Hold on. my words got jumbled up while I was trying to say them.
You're good.
Hold on, everyone. Just bear with me a moment. So in those moments when you're, talking to a beginner and a beginner's like, okay, there's a lot of stuff in this book that I'm not really familiar with. And because if you're just brand new to witchcraft, there are a lot of complex topics within the book. Not saying that's a bad thing, just saying there
Yeah.
are a lot of complex ones. So do you have a book list that you would recommend or, a couple of books or even a author or anything like that that you would recommend to somebody starting with before they go and dive into fetch work?
Yeah, I feel like any book that really is going to teach you, that's a great question. Like, why am I spacing on these books right now?
I do that all the time. It's like, "Hey, what
like,
book would work?" And it's like, "Uh, 10,000 topics? I don't know." I'm like, "Hold on, give me I gotta go look at my library. Hang on."
yeah, I know. Well, I feel like, any book that's gonna really teach you like magical like the principles of like working with magical power would be great books to kind of comb through. I know Matt Oren's book Psychic Witch has a lot of really good exercises in there.
Mhm.
Another one that I think gets overlooked a lot, and I think it's out of print. Let me see if I can find it. Jason Augustus Newcomb, The Book of Magic Power. Yes. This book was just, I remember reading this for the first time, and it was just mental exercise after mental exercise after mental exercise. All of them were intended to help fortify the mind and the spirit to really tap into the powers. So, like, that's one that I can recommend. I mean, if folks can find, like, a used copy of it, great. Like, it really truly is, like, a good exercise book to help you just refine those mental skills. Because when we're working with the spirit world, we're not, just lighting a candle and saying a few words, right? Like, we're engaging spirits of another realm. So there's a lot of mental discipline that's absolutely required for that.
Mhm. I agree with that, and, also another really great topical book that would work really well in line with yours would be Weave the Liminal by Laura Temple
Oh,
Zackroff.
yes.
Love that
I
book so much.
I did read that book. It's good.
It is such a great one. It's, like, one of the first ones that I'm like, "Here, you're new witch, read this. Start here." Then
Yeah.
I've got, like, 60 other books you could read after that.
Yeah, yep, exactly. I know Chris Orapello and Tara, their Bassam Stegan Sword is a really good foundational
Mhm.
book. And I did go back and forth on how I don't want to say entry level I
Yeah,
wanted to be with this book, but like because I know like a person like on day one of being a witch is not going to say, I feel compelled to work with my fetch. They're going to say, how do I cast a candle? You know what I mean? Like
right,
that's
of
just generally
course.
where we start. But so I did put things in there like, preparing the mind, preparing a space,
Yeah.
forming your circle and things like that, just so that some folks who were newer to the craft would still have something to kind of guide them and it could all be in one place. But I also say, like, hey, if you have your own tradition already or your own practice, by all means, replace this with what you're doing and just
Mhm.
use the techniques that follow.
Yes, and I think that that was a really great way to frame that, and, obviously, like, reading your book, even as a really well-seasoned practitioner, there was a lot of things that I'm like, "Wow, this is deep. This is really a deep topic, and, like, this is some good advanced work." So, yeah, I do believe that if you know your basics, you could do this work, but if you don't know your basics, start there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And you'll notice I didn't use terms in the like I tried to keep the book tradition agnostic.
Yes, you
I
did a
didn't
really
want
good job with that, by the way.
oh, good, sweet, good, good, good. So like I didn't use phrasing like, athame or things like that. I used your dagger or your blade and I tried to not incorporate tools like pentacles into the working because not all magical tradition need pentacles. So the idea is it is just a book of witchcraft and you can take your personal traditions, your magical practice and incorporate those elements into it to make the techniques align with your magical path.
Yes, I love that. Now, kind of bridging a little bit into that more advanced stuff. Um, Channeling versus shape shifting. We all know a little bit about channeling. We all know a little bit about shape shifting. Goodness, I
Yep.
can't English. Um, now, obviously, your book kind of it bridges into both, and some of the things that looks like shape shifting with a fetch also looks like fetch channeling. Is there a difference between those, or are they actually the same thing?
I think they're more or less the same, and because the shape shifting, I did that in 3 sessions or 3, different levels with that.
Yes, you did. Yes.
Yeah. So like I thought it best to just kind of gradually work up to the more advanced stuff. It's all mental gymnastics, right? It's all about
Yes.
making sure that like that's really what it is, you know? Step one is to see through the eyes of your fetch, right? Like that's the easiest part. And then you see and you feel through your fetch. And then you go out and you experience the world through your fetch. I was going back and forth on whether or not to include a section on this in the book. I I, I ended up not. Um, just because I didn't really feel like it fit with the whole theme
Mhm,
of what I was trying to do here. But like the whole concept of like the witch's sabbath. Are you familiar with
mhm.
that? Yeah.
I've actually
Well,
done a full witches Sabbath meditation with Storm Fairy Wolf. It was
oh,
amazing.
nice. Oh, yeah, yeah,
Yes.
yeah. Oh, we have a book coming out, The Storm Suit.
Do you? Okay,
Yeah.
we'll talk about that later. But
Okay, go. Just shameless plug, right?
yes.
um, but you know, like there's the whole concept of the etheric witch's Sabbath, which is more than today's a Sabbath, which is more than just
Oh my
those, you
gosh,
know,
it is. What do you know?
the solstice, right? You know, it's that etheric meeting place where witches go in spirit for communion with like their gods, other spirits, and that's how we obtain our esoteric knowledge. And I was like, well, the fetch could be a fantastic vehicle to get the witch there. You know, like
Mhm.
you go through the process of projecting yourself into your fetch, and then once you're in your fetch, you travel etherically to the Sabbath. And once you're at the Sabbath, you converse with all the other witches and the gods and all this fun stuff. And the more that I started writing, I still have like my notes and from my experiences of that, and I'm like, oh my gosh, now I have to explain the whole Sabbath, like, and here's why it's actually not just like the summer solstice. You know what I mean? Like,
Mhm.
so it just, I felt like it just took the book and made it into something that I didn't want it to be.
That sounds like
So,
another book in the works.
yeah, I know, right?
Shameless plug moments. Just wink, wink.
The light bulb just went up. Well, like, you know, like that's the joy of it. I mean, yes, it's fun to go out and explore and stuff like that and like walk around the city as your fetch in etheric form. But really like getting to the Sabbath and being able to drink, you know, from the cup of forbidden knowledge. God, there's something so profound and so powerful about that.
I know, right? It's an
Yeah.
incredible thing. If you've never gotten to experience one of those meditations, I want to say that Storm's got some in one of his books. I don't remember which one. I own them all. I just don't remember which one. Because it's been a hot minute since I've read it. But
Yeah.
there are a lot of books out there that do talk about the witch's Sabbath, the witch's meditation with Sabbath, the whole 9 yards. Um, there may actually be a witch's Sabbath episode on this show. If not, it was
Ooh,
my other show that I did. I don't
I'll have
remember.
to go
It's
back
been
and
a
look.
long time. I mean, I've been doing the show for almost 5 years, so it's been a long time.
Yeah.
Um, so
I'll have to go find it. It's
if
so
that's
like
the case, great. If not, I'm gonna have to like message Storm and be like, "Hey, we should do this because I don't know if this is still a thing."
I know I got to meet them the first time, like, Storm at a convocation in Michigan, last year, I think it was,
Mhm.
and I remember just feeling like a little like, "Oh my god." Like, I can't
She is
believe
the
you.
honestly, I think Storm has been on the show probably about 7 or 8 times.
Yeah,
I love him so much. He's like we're like the besties that don't talk all the time, but when we do talk, we'll talk for like 5 or 6 hours during
yeah.
like we'll record for like an hour and then we talk for like another 4 hours after that. Um, but yeah, he's incredible. Matt's incredible. Devin's incredible. I have not had the opportunity to talk to Storm's partner Chaz or his husband. So
Yeah.
beyond that, I've pretty much talked to the whole four locks in
Yeah,
interview form.
yeah, they're all so sweet. I
I
haven't met
know.
Kaz either, but the other ones, yeah, like, they're so kind, so I'm so looking forward to seeing them again at convocation next year.
I love that. So speaking of kind of next year, what's in the works for you next year? What's your upcoming projects? Any books that you can tease out? Do you have classes? And obviously, where can people find you online?
Yeah, definitely. So I am working on another book and I can tease on it a little bit, but I am working on a book that explores a system of witchcraft um inspired by Dante's Inferno.
Ooh,
So yeah, so that's coming along nicely. I just spent all day working on it this morning. I've got about 18,000 words done so far.
love that.
But it's coming along nicely, so that one will be out. Um, and I think early 2027 or spring 2027 catalog.
Yeah, that makes about sense for timeline
Yep,
wise. Yeah.
yep, yeah. So that's the next project that I'm working on, and I know my brother Wick is also working on a couple of books too. I'm very proud of him. Yeah, and then we're online at Blake Malliway for Facebook, Instagram, Blue Sky, which I post on like once every month when I remember.
I forget that sky exists too, so you're not alone.
Okay, goodness. I'm so bad at updating that one. And then, crossprobooks.com is where
Yes.
you can find my book and all of our titles.
I love that so much. This has been wonderful. Thank you so much for writing the book, and being able to explain this wonderful thing that we just kind of were starting to, I think, lose a little bit because it was kind of getting lost in the folklore after a while and not
Yeah.
really being talked about. So I'm really glad you wrote a book about it, and it was a beautiful book. It was wonderful. For everyone who is listening, make sure you go out and pick up a copy of A Witch's Guide to Fetch Work by Blake Malliway, obviously, and make sure that you are getting a copy of that and dive into it, learn about it, go meet your fetch, go explore, go cause some chaos. Just, don't burn the world down. It's already trying to do that on its own. We don't need any extra matches. So, that being said, Blake, thank you again so much for being here. And everyone, take care of yourselves. Be kind to each other. Be kind to yourselves. And I will see you all next time for another episode. Bye bye, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Take care. Bye bye.
Hello, friends. So, as you know, I do a lot of community work as well, in addition to the show. So, if you're looking to deepen your practice with and connect with like minded witches like myself, or even get your questions answered, you should join the Discord. And the Discord has this beautiful community that I have built, and it offers some really great opportunities for witches to connect. Once a month, we host Temple Hours. I know, silly name, but it's true. We host a open discussion where you can ask your witchcraft, paganism, or even spiritual questions. And if you're curious about deity work, spellcraft, or if you just want to chat with other fellow practitioners like myself, because I usually will be there, Temple Hours is a space where you can come and learn and grow. The other one that we offer is the Divine Gathering. So every week we host a public devotional circle to honor our gods, share offerings, and strengthen our spiritual connections with the divine. So no matter who you work with, no matter where you are in your practice, this is a time for reverence and community support. So you should totally come join us in the Raven's Nook. It's a great place. It's a warm community. It is very welcoming, very chill and relaxed. And if you want to join us, which I hope that you will, there's a link in the show description, and I can't wait to see you there. So take care, everyone, and I'll see you all next time.